Jean-Paul Sartre's 1944 play No Exit is most famous for proclaiming l'enfer c'est les autres, or as it is commonly translated into English, hell is other people. This line near the end of the play describes the moment where Garçon, the male protagonist, realizes that everything about his present stay in hell has been thought out beforehand. That everything in the room, from the mantelpiece to the chairs, had been prearranged for all the principal characters of the play to spend a hellish eternity together. However, this idea that hell is other people works in many ways throughout the play. One of the most obvious ways in which this idea is played out in No Exit is through the physical lack of reflective surfaces on stage and the use of character dialogue as a sort of mirror. Thusly, this choice of stage direction and dialogue indicate that each character of the play is functioning as a reflection of the other. This use of bodies and dialogue as reflective surfaces, while indicative of the difficulties of living with each other, is more importantly a symptom of the difficulty of living with oneself. Because by acting as mirrors for each other, what each character in the play helps reveal about their companions is the fear, guilt, and jealousy, selfishness, and hatred that each one of them carried throughout their life. On the other hand, these negative emotions are all emotions that could only be felt, experienced through close contact with each other. As social animals who must live in social units like family, clan, tribe, community, and even nation, the experience of living with others is a fundamental component of our lives. The underlying ontological tension in No Exit is then found in this relationship between self and others. That is, one has to ask, what is the relationship between oneself and the other? What are the terms by which the self must cohabit the same space with the other? And in that situation, what is the responsibility of oneself towards the other? As the characters seek to discover the reasons why they are in hell, the trait that connects them all is that in their own way they have all caused others to suffer, or they have allowed others to suffer. In the case of Garçon, this can be observed not only by the suffering he inflicted on his wife, that is, by neglecting her and keeping a mistress, but above all, by his inability to act when action was required of him during the war. Although he says, I ran a pacifist newspaper, then war broke out. What was I to do? Everyone was watching me, wondering, will he dare? Will I dare? I folded my arms and they shot at me. Had I done anything wrong? The constant fear of being known as a coward for having tried to escape the war under the cloak of pacifism is the point of the narrative which allows the reader and the spectator to understand that behind his inaction there was a fault. That is to say, by not acting and taking a pacifist role, he becomes as guilty as those he sought to fight. The rationale here is that those who fail to act when an injustice is done are almost as guilty as those who commit the injustice. In the case of the female characters, Inez and Estelle, their guilt, although more complex in its ontological implications, it's much easier to identify. For Estelle, she is guilty of having killed her child. For Inez, on the other hand, she is guilty of having made her cousin's wife turn against him and through a series of actions ends up becoming responsible for the death of all the principal characters. Unrepentant and well aware of her guilt, when Garçon tried to prove to her that he was not a coward by trying to run away from the war, Inez says, it's what one does and nothing else that shows the stuff one's made of. This last line seems to be at the heart of the play because it expresses that idea that above our intentions, our faults, our desires, It is primarily through our visible actions that we are to be judged, indeed characterized. After all, it is through our visible actions that the experience of living with each other is primarily observed and understood. Therefore, if the play asks what one's responsibility is towards the other, the play seems to suggest that whatever that responsibility is, it rests completely in the awareness of the consequences of our actions or inactions.